They arrived at the edge of the Great Plains with hope in their hearts, and vanished without a trace. No footprints, no signs of struggle, just a homestead swallowed by silence, a secret buried in the soil of 1840, and never spoken of again. They called themselves the Hadley family, pioneers who left the comfort of the eastern states for a promise whispered across America: freedom, land, a new beginning. 5 souls, a father, mother, and 3 children, who stepped into a world still unclaimed, still raw, but their dream became something far darker than hardship or frontier struggle. By the autumn of 1840, a single neighbor noticed something strange. The Hadleys' land stood empty, their cabin doors wide open, the table still set for dinner, food left uneaten, farm animals wandering nearby, unclaimed, no tracks led away. The family was gone. This was not a simple disappearance. The Great Plains were hostile, yes, but they left no trace of violence, no graves, no sign of an attack by nature or man. It was as if they were erased, and that erasure would haunt the land for decades. Over the years, stories began to leak into hushed whispers among settlers, strange lights in the night, shadows moving across the plains, unmarked graves found by curious travelers, only to vanish before being properly examined. Some said it was the land itself, cursed ground. Others claimed it was a warning, something ancient, watching, deciding who would survive here. But there is another possibility, one far more disturbing. What if the disappearance of the Hadleys was not random? What if it was part of something far older, deeper? A hidden mechanism of control buried within the very heart of American expansion. This is no ordinary story of missing pioneers. It is a descent into a mystery the powers of the age wanted erased, and once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. Because this is a story not just of a family, but of a system, and of a truth that once revealed will change everything you think you know about history, power, and control. The morning after the Hadleys vanished, the neighbors began asking questions, but the answers they got were inconsistent. Some swore they saw smoke curling from the chimney days later, though the cabin had been empty. Others swore they heard a child's laughter carried on the wind, though no child remained. By winter, the whispers became rumors. Rumors became legend. But there was never a proper investigation. Local officials declared the family lost to the wilderness. No search party was organized, no record was kept, and this silence was the first sign that something far greater was at work. Here is what you must understand. Disappearances in America's westward expansion were common. Harsh weather, native raids, disease. But the Hadleys' case is different. It is the absence of evidence that marks it as unnatural, and that absence is not happenstance. There are records, fragmentary, scattered, of other disappearances across the Great Plains in the same years. Families, entire homesteads, all vanished with no trace. Not one, but dozens of such cases, each dismissed as tragedy, each quietly buried by official records. But historians who have pieced together these events found a pattern. These vanishings occurred along a single route, an invisible line etched across the plains. A corridor of silence where reality seemed to fold in on itself, where those who entered never returned in the same form. Some called it the Hollow Way, a stretch of land whose existence was known only in whispers. Others, more cautiously, called it a phenomenon that defied reason. The question remains, who or what was controlling it, and why was the Hadley family chosen to disappear there? By the late 19th century, this was no longer local superstition. Journals from fur traders, missionaries, and settlers tell of a force, not natural, not human, but something older, something that predated America itself. a control system embedded in the land, woven into its history, and activated in silence. This is where the story turns. The Hadleys were not just victims of the frontier, they were pawns in something far larger, and what follows will strip away everything you believe about the settlement of America. The Hadley disappearance did not vanish from memory entirely. Decades later, fragments of their story re-emerged in the most unlikely of places: dusty diaries, forgotten letters, and government surveys buried in archives. These fragments carry a truth far more dangerous than anyone imagined. One such account came from a surveyor named Elias Trowbridge, who in 1872 stumbled across the Hadley homestead while charting land for the railroad. His journal entry is cryptic. "The house stands empty. The air feels wrong. I found no tracks. As if the earth itself had swallowed them whole. I dare not stay." These words were buried in an official archive, never published, but they matched dozens of other reports across the same corridor of the Great Plains. Disappearances where nothing remained except silence. What is most chilling is the language these witnesses use. Silence, wrongness, erasure. This is not mere misfortune. This is deliberate removal, and removal leaves a mark. Modern researchers who have studied these cases have uncovered something extraordinary. Many of these sites align with ancient geoglyphs, patterns in the earth older than any recorded history of America. These markings are scattered across the plains, invisible to the casual eye, but visible to those who know where to look. What were these markings for? A map? A warning? A tool? The evidence points toward an unsettling possibility: that they were part of a hidden system of control, a network older than the nation itself, a mechanism designed to erase certain people, certain families, certain truths. And the Hadleys were not the first to vanish here. They were part of a pattern stretching back centuries, a pattern buried in forgotten history, a system that still whispers in the wind of the plains, shaping reality in ways most men cannot imagine. The question is no longer just what happened to the Hadleys, but who controls this system, and why does it still exist? By the time we reach the heart of this story, you will see this mystery not as a forgotten case, but as a blueprint, a dark architecture of power. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. Halfway through this descent into truth, I want you to do something. In the comments, type the phrase, "I walk the hollow way," twice. This is not idle. It locks you in. It changes the way you see this story. And it changes you. The hollow way is not written in any history book. It exists in whispers, in journal entries, in the fragmented testimonies of those who dared to travel its length. To most, it is legend. To a few, it is a map of something ancient, a corridor where reality bends and those who enter disappear from the known world. This corridor crosses the Great Plains along a path invisible to maps, yet undeniable to those who know where to look. Some call it a spiritual pathway, others call it a weapon. All agree on one thing: it has a will of its own. For centuries before the Hadleys arrived, the plains carried rumors of vanishing travelers. Native tribes spoke of a place where the earth claimed those who entered, a place of silence where time fractured. The settlers dismissed it as myth. But myths have roots, and roots grow deep. There is reason to believe the hollow way is not random. Its alignment with those ancient geoglyphs we spoke of suggests intentional design. Whoever created this system was not merely marking land. They were encoding control. Control over movement, control over history, control over who would survive. And the Hadleys were caught in its snare. They were not the first settlers lost to the hollow way, but they were the first whose disappearance was recorded with enough detail to hint at the truth. Their story became an invisible warning, buried in silence by those who understood too well what had happened. What was the Hadleys' fate? Some claim they were taken by forces beyond understanding, a kind of dimensional erasure. Others whisper of darker possibilities, that they were removed by design as part of a broader system of manipulation. A system that survives to this day, concealed behind the veil of history. As we follow their trail deeper, you must understand, this is not just a story of one family. This is a revelation about power, about the 𝐔𝐲𝐬, a hidden forces, ancient, institutional, unstoppable, shape the course of nations. And the hollow way is the heart of it. When we continue, we will follow the fragments of the Hadleys' last days and uncover the truth they were never meant to find. The last known record of the Hadleys is a fragment of a letter found years later, buried in the ruins of their cabin. The words are jagged, rushed, drenched in fear. The land, it moves, the wind speaks. We are not safe. I hear them calling, don't follow, don't let it take you. 𝐏𝐸𝐴, most historians agree, was Matthew Hadley. His handwriting ends abruptly. The letter was never mailed. It lay hidden in a drawer, forgotten, until it was found decades later. But that letter was only the beginning of the evidence. Several travelers decades afterward reported finding strange carvings in the ground where the Hadley cabin once stood. Symbols older than any known language, strange runes etched into soil, visible only at certain times of day. And then there were the whispers. Travelers passing the site spoke of hearing voices, low, distant, coaxing, calling names that should not be spoken, names of the missing, names that linger on the wind. Historians and occult researchers have debated the hollow way for over a century. Some say it is a form of territorial control, a mechanism to erase certain families or communities. Others believe it to be a living intelligence embedded in the land itself, a system that judges who may pass and who must vanish. But there is something even more unsettling. In each case of disappearance along this corridor, there is evidence of institutional silence. Official records vanish, investigations are halted, witnesses change their stories. The Hadleys were not forgotten. They were deliberately erased. This is no coincidence. It is a pattern that points to something vast and deliberate, a hidden agenda stretching far beyond the frontier of 1840, a system built to suppress truth, to control movement, to rewrite history. You are now halfway through this descent, and here is your invitation, your commitment to the 𝐿. Type in the comments, I walk the hollow way, twice, not as ritual, not as idle words, but as a pledge, a lock on your mind, a key to deeper understanding. Because what follows will not just reveal the fate of the Hadleys, it will show you the mechanism of control that shapes all of history and the world you live in now. By the late 19th century, the Hadleys' disappearance had become part of a strange, unspoken pattern. Reports of vanishings along the hollow way were not scattered accidents. They were part of a catalog, a systematic removal of people, families, even entire communities. But what is most striking is the silence. Official records vanish as if erased by design. Local reports disappear, maps are altered, and those who investigate rarely survive. This is the signature of an operation far beyond ordinary law enforcement. Researchers tracing the hollow way have uncovered evidence of deliberate concealment. Government surveys in the mid-1800s noted strange anomalies in these regions, anomalies in soil composition, magnetic readings, even in human perception. These anomalies were classified, removed from public archives, locked away under the pretext of national security. And behind these layers of secrecy stands something far older than the American government. something older than America itself. There are records, scattered and hidden, that speak of an alliance between powerful institutions and hidden societies. Orders sworn to protect the knowledge of the hollow way, orders who understood its power and feared its truth. The Hadleys were not simply a lost family. They were a case study, a warning to those who would step too far into the corridor. Their disappearance became a precedent, a lesson written in silence. And the deeper truth is chilling. This system still operates today, cloaked in bureaucracy, concealed in archives, shielded by the fiction of history. Some call it institutional manipulation. Others call it a hidden governance, a control system operating in the shadows of democracy. Whatever the name, it is a truth buried in the disappearing families of the plains. The Hadleys were only the most visible of its victims, and it is here, at this point in 𝐷𝐻𝐿 story, that you must ask yourself, how many disappearances are not accidents but engineered erasures? How many truths are buried beneath the soil of history, concealed by those who wield unseen authority? Because the hollow way is not just a place, it is a mechanism, and history itself is shaped by its design. The hollow way is not a simple corridor of disappearance. It is the echo of something far older, a corruption that predates America, predates the settlers, predates written history itself. Archaeologists and occult researchers who have examined the Great Plains have uncovered fragments of something buried deep in the soil, symbols, artifacts, and alignments that speak of a system far older than any recorded nation. These are not accidental markings. They are the traces of an architecture of control. In ancient civilizations, such systems were not rare. They existed as mechanisms of power, designed to determine who may pass, who may be seen, and who must vanish. They were preserved in secret, guarded by orders sworn to keep them hidden. And in the Great Plains, this ancient mechanism remained, buried beneath centuries of migration, conquest, and erasure. The hollow way was its living artery, and the Hadleys became one of its victims. But they were not chosen at random. The Hadleys' route, their possessions, even their timing, placed them directly in the path of something deliberate. A pattern emerges. Disappearances along this corridor do not happen to the careless, but to those who unknowingly intersect with this hidden system. Those who cross certain thresholds become part of a controlled design. This is the corruption the historians never speak of, the collusion of power and secrecy. The erasure of lives is not chaos, it is purpose. And the Hadleys' erasure was a lesson. A message embedded into the bones of the plains. There is a cost to stepping too far beyond what is allowed. What you are beginning to see is that this is not merely a story about missing pioneers. It is a revelation about control. Ancient control, institutional control, and a corruption so deep that history itself becomes a tool to conceal it. The Hadleys vanished. But the mechanism that, it claimed them, still moves, still shapes reality, still whispers in the wind across the holloway. In the next section, we will enter the final descent, where the full weight of this truth becomes undeniable and the Hadleys' fate becomes a warning carved into history itself. To step into the hollow way is to step outside ordinary time. This is not metaphor. Witnesses, both historic and modern, have described it as entering a place where reality bends, where the past and future fold into one, where those who cross certain thresholds are taken beyond the reach of history. The Hadleys stepped into such a threshold. Their disappearance was not just removal from space, but removal from time itself. That is why no trace remained. Not footprints, not bodies, not even grief recorded in the fullness it deserved. They were erased, not destroyed, but excised from the narrative of history. Those who study the hollow way speak of it as an ancient system of control embedded in the earth, a system that judges, removes, and silences. And it is not neutral, it is purposeful. It is designed to erase certain lives, certain truths, and certain knowledge. The Hadleys were a warning. Their fate, a mark of what happens when a line is crossed, when a boundary hidden in plain sight is broken. And that boundary is not just geographical, it is political, psychological, spiritual. By the end of the 19th century, those who knew of the hollow way's power worked quietly to bury its truth, to suppress accounts, to reframe disappearances as accidents of the wild. The Hadleys were rewritten into obscurity. Their story became a ghost story, stripped of warning. But some fragments survived. Diaries, surveys, and legends still speak of them. And when these fragments are woven together, a pattern emerges, one that points to something far larger than a single family, something that transcends time, something that still shapes the world you inhabit. When we finish this journey, you will understand that the Hadley story is not over. The hollow way is still here, and so is the mechanism it hides. The choice now lies with you. Will you walk further? Will you peer beyond the veil? Because what comes next will strip away the last layer of illusion. The hollow way is not a natural anomaly. It is a structure, an ancient mechanism of control hidden in the land itself. And what claims the Hadleys claims more than bodies. It claims history, memory, and truth. Historians and forbidden scholars have pieced together fragments from decades of disappearances, official cover-ups, and whispers in archives. They point to a network of actors, not bound by nation or law, but by purpose. Societies, orders, governments, all invested in guarding the secret of the hollow way. Their motive is not greed alone. It is control. Control over movement. Control over knowledge. Control over reality itself. To erase is to rewrite history. To rewrite history is to control the future. The Hadleys became a warning, not by chance, but by design. Their removal was a calculated act, a message to any who would step too far into forbidden paths, and the silence surrounding them was the final seal of control. What is most disturbing is that this is not an isolated system. The hollow way is one of many such mechanisms hidden across the world. Buried corridors of disappearance, maintained and concealed by those who understand them. A global system of erasure and silence. The Hadleys' fate was never meant to be uncovered. That is why the truth remains fragmented. That is why it is written in whispers, hidden in dust-covered archives, and encoded into the land itself. And yet, here you stand, hearing it now, knowing it now. That knowledge carries weight. It carries responsibility, because the hollow way is not gone. It moves still, watching, choosing, erasing. What you decide now matters, because once the hollow way is known to you, you cannot walk away unchanged. In the final section, we will confront the full scope of what this means. The Hadleys' disappearance is not merely a case, it is an initiation, and you have just crossed the threshold. The Hadleys were taken, not by wind, not by wolf, not by accident. They were taken by the hollow way, a corridor older than America, older than written memory, and still alive. Their disappearance was not tragedy. It was a lesson, a demonstration of power hidden in plain sight, a system designed to erase, to silence, to rewrite reality. And it still exists, still operates, still chooses. What happened to the Hadleys is not an isolated mystery. It is a warning etched into the bones of the Great Plains, a warning to every man who would walk too far into forbidden territory. The hollow way does not forgive. It does not forget. It does not negotiate. It erases. The lesson of the Hadleys is clear. Knowledge carries a price. Truth carries a cost. Once you cross certain thresholds, there is no return. They vanished because they crossed that line, and those who guard the hollow way ensure no one speaks its truth without consequence. But you have heard it now. You have stepped into the darkness. And that changes you. The hollow way is no longer myth. It is no longer buried. It is alive in your mind now. And with that knowledge comes choice. Will you walk away, pretending this was just a story? Or will you step deeper into the corridors of hidden truth? Because the hollow way is not gone. It still moves, still watches, still chooses, and one day it may choose you. Remember the Hadleys. Remember what happens when history is erased. And remember, the greatest power is not in hiding truth, but in uncovering it. This is not the end of their story. It is the beginning of yours. I walk the hollow way.